My name is Agatha. I'm 34 years old, and I'm a mother of two girls. Lily, who's 7, and Nora, just turned 2. I live in a modest apartment on the 3rd floor of an aging brick building that creaks when the wind picks up. But I've come to love the sound. It makes the place feel alive, like it's standing its ground, the same way I have. Most days start early. I'm up before the sun, quietly slipping out of bed so I don't wake Nora, making Lily's breakfast and lunch, checking emails while the coffee brews. I run a small bookkeeping business from home, mostly for local clients, independent contractors, a florist, 2 small cafes. It's not glamorous, but it's solid. It keeps the lights on, the fridge full, and the girls in dance shoes and crayons. I think people hear the phrase single mom, and their mind rushes to struggle. And yes, there are struggles. I won't lie. I've had to say no to myself more times than I can count, and I've gone without sleep more nights than I can remember. But what I've built, it's not a sob story. It's a life, and it's mine. I've become the kind of woman who knows exactly how many days a gallon of milk will last, and how to stretch $1 without making it feel like scarcity. I clip coupons not because I have to, but because I find it satisfying, like playing a quiet game I'm very good at. I know which stores mark down produce on Tuesdays. I know when Nora will start to fuss based on the color of the sky. And I know, deeply and without apology, that I am enough for my daughters. Our days have a rhythm. Mornings are busy, afternoons softer. Lily tells me about school while Nora tries to repeat everything she says like a tiny, messy echo. I keep a whiteboard in the kitchen where I write our weekly menu and leave little notes, reminders like, library books due Thursday, or don't forget to breathe. That last one's more for me than for anyone else. At night, once the girls are asleep and the apartment is still, I sometimes sit by the window with a cup of tea and just listen. The quiet doesn't scare me. Not anymore. It used to. Silence meant thinking, and thinking used to mean pain. Now, it's a kind of victory. A space where I can reflect, dream, plan. There's a photo on my bookshelf, Lily holding Nora as a newborn, both of them looking straight at the camera with those huge eyes they got from me. People always comment on how alike we are. It's true. And every time I look at them, I feel that strange, full ache that only mothers understand. The mix of fear and pride and love so big, it sometimes feels like your ribs can't contain it. People often assume that I must be bitter, that there must be some lingering sadness in the corners of my life, that I sit around wishing things had turned out differently. But that's not how it is, because I've built something real. I've made a home with warmth, laughter, and routines. I've watched my children thrive under my care, and I've thrived too, in a different way. Quieter, maybe, but stronger. I've learned to do things I never thought I'd have to. I've patched drywall. I've negotiated bills. I've carried sleeping children and groceries at the same time up 3 flights of stairs with a bad ankle and no complaints. I've grown. And when people ask how I do it, how I stay calm, how I keep going, how I manage, I smile and say, you'd be surprised what you can do when no one else is going to do it for you. But what most people don't know is that I wasn't always this version of myself. That this steadiness I wear like armor was forged, not gifted. That behind this calm voice and practical nature, there's a story. A wound that used to bleed and now just quietly reminds me. That's what I want to talk about now. Not because I live in the past, but because sometimes the way a woman becomes strong starts with the moment she's shattered. And mine? It started with a betrayal so sharp, so selfish, so beyond the line of decency, that for a while I couldn't even say it out loud. But I will now, because it matters, because what followed proves everything. And because, in the end, the one who tried to break me only ruined himself. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from when I was still someone who believed in promises. I was 25 when I met Aaron. I was working part-time as a receptionist at a local law office and taking evening classes to finish my degree in finance. My days were long, my bank account always thin, but I was full of hope. The kind of hope you only have in your 20s, when everything still feels like it's about to fall into place. He came in to update some paperwork for his auto detailing business. Confident, casual, good-looking in a way that felt almost too deliberate, like he knew how to work a room. He flirted with me right away. I remember thinking he was too slick, too fast. But then he made me laugh, and he kept showing up, bringing coffee, staying a few minutes too long when he came to drop off documents. Slowly, I let my guard down. He wasn't like the guys I dated before. He had plans, ambition. He talked about his goals constantly, opening more locations, building something from the ground up. He was magnetic in that way some men are. All momentum, all vision. I mistook it for substance. 6 months later, we were living together. By the time I graduated, I was pregnant with Lily. The pregnancy wasn't exactly planned, but Aaron proposed the day I told him. It was messy and romantic. Flowers from the gas station, a ring he later admitted he bought on clearance. But it felt like commitment. It felt like a new chapter, the kind you tell your kids about later. I said yes because I wanted the story. For a while, it looked like we were building something real. We got married in a courthouse, had Lily in a hospital that smelled like bleach and quiet panic. She was perfect. Aaron held her like he'd never seen anything so small. And for a while, I believed we were a family. But even then, there were signs. He was charming to everyone. Waitresses, receptionists, strangers in line. He told stories that changed slightly every time he repeated them. He had a way of turning every small inconvenience into a personal insult from the universe. And when things didn't go his way, he sulked. Not loudly, not violently, just enough to make you feel like you disappointed him. Like loving him wasn't quite enough. Still, I chalked it up to stress, to growing pains. I was adjusting to motherhood. He was expanding his business. We were young. That's what I told myself every time he came home late, every time his phone died, every time I felt the loneliness creep in around the edges of our life. When Lily turned 4, I started to feel like I was getting my footing again. I had some part-time clients doing bookkeeping. I was contributing slowly. I felt strong, stable. Then I got pregnant with Nora. This time, Aaron didn't propose. We were already married, but his reaction was different. Less excitement, more silence. He said he was surprised that we'd need to tighten the belt. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The pregnancy was harder than the first, more fatigue, more nausea, and a complication around the second trimester that led to early contractions and a mandatory order for bed rest. The doctor said, "You need to slow down. No lifting, no stress. Let your body do its work." So I did. I let the laundry pile up. I asked Aaron to handle groceries. I let Lily climb into bed with me and color in the margins of my planner. I did what I could. I told myself I was being a good mother, protecting the life growing inside me, and I waited for Aaron to step up. He didn't. At first, it was subtle. He'd forget things, diapers, errands, daycare pickup. He said work was busy, that he had a lot on his plate. I understood. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. But then it became clear. He was avoiding me. Staying out later, staring at his phone with that slack-jawed, slightly amused look that people get when they think no one's watching. He stopped touching me. Not just physically, emotionally. His words became clipped, conversations shallow. I started to feel like a tenant in my own home. Still, I clung to hope. I told myself that men panic during pregnancies, that maybe he was scared. I remembered a moment during my first pregnancy when he had put his hand on my belly and whispered, "We're going to be okay." I wanted that man back. I even blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't fun anymore. Maybe the stress was making me hard to live with. I told myself that once the baby arrived, things would settle. We'd reconnect. We'd remember why we started this. But somewhere deep down, I already knew. The silence wasn't temporary. It was strategy. Then came the night that tore the veil off completely. I was 35 weeks along, swollen and exhausted, barely able to walk without pain. He said he was going to a late meeting. He kissed my forehead and left with the car keys jangling in his hand. I didn't ask questions. I was too tired to play the role of the suspicious wife. He came back after midnight, smelling like cheap cologne and alcohol. His hair was mussed. There was a smudge of lipstick on his collar. And when I asked, calmly, gently, where he'd been, he didn't even lie. He rolled his eyes. "Out," he said. "Jesus, Agatha, you're not my warden." Then he went into the bathroom and shut the door. It was the sound of that door, clicking shut without hesitation, that broke something in me. Not the cheating, not the betrayal, the indifference. He didn't care that I knew, because in his mind, I had nowhere else to go. But what he didn't understand, what men like him never understand, is that women like me don't stay because we're weak. We stay until we've seen enough. And that night, I'd seen everything I needed to. He was already asleep by the time I crawled into bed that night. His back turned to me like a punctuation mark. That's what he had become. An ending I hadn't realized I was already living through. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, hand on my belly as Nora rolled gently beneath my skin. She was quiet that night, like she knew, like she was listening. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. That came as a surprise, even to me. I just lay still, my mind filing things away with mechanical precision. The messages, the late nights, the tone in his voice, the little lies, the lipstick, the way he hadn't even flinched when I caught him. The next morning, I made him coffee. That probably sounds strange. But I did. I made breakfast too. Waffles, the way Lily liked them. I packed her school lunch, braided her hair, and smiled when Aaron came into the kitchen. I asked him how he slept. He looked at me suspiciously, but said nothing. It's funny how men like him think you're dangerous when you stop yelling. As if silence somehow becomes more threatening than fury. And maybe it is. Because silence means calculation. Silence means you're not going to warn them before you strike. I waited 2 weeks. 2 weeks of pretending, of storing energy, of watching him like a scientist watches a specimen. He barely noticed. He thought he'd gotten away with it. He was even kinder at times, overcompensating in that smug, guilty way. But he kept going out, kept coming home late, still left his phone face down every night. During that time, I spoke with a lawyer, quietly, carefully. A woman, of course, recommended by another single mom I knew from Lily's school. She walked me through the steps, helped me understand the options. I gathered documents. I collected statements. I made copies of his texts, photos of the nights he said he was working late while tagged at bars on social media. I saved screenshots, transferred them to a private folder on a thumb drive I wore around my neck. Nora was born a month later, healthy, soft-cheeked, and perfect. She looked just like Lily did when she was born. Same nose, same serious little eyes. Aaron was at the hospital, of course, smiling for the photos, posting on Facebook like he was Father of the Year. 2 days after we came home, I handed him the papers. He didn't even read them at first. just stared at the top page, blinking. "What is this?" he asked. "You know what it is." He laughed, short, stunned. "You're overreacting." I didn't respond. "You're going to break up our family because you're hormonal?" Still, I said nothing. I picked up Nora, held her against my chest, and walked out of the room. That was the last real conversation we had. The divorce wasn't quick, but it was clean. I had proof. I had support. And I had nothing to hide. He moved out, got a studio apartment across town, tried to paint himself as the victim to anyone who would listen, but not many bought it. It's hard to sound righteous when your infidelity is sitting in screenshots and time-stamped bar photos. For the first few months, things were hard. The nights were long. Nora was colicky. Lily missed her dad and asked hard questions in soft voices. But I didn't waver. I created a routine. I got up early. I found more clients. I made charts and checklists and held our life together with both hands. And slowly, things got better. My business grew. Word of mouth from satisfied clients brought more work. I hired a part-time assistant, a college student named Haley, who adored the girls and helped me balance things. We moved to a slightly larger apartment with a small balcony and a view of the city lights. The girls thrived. And Aaron? Well, at first he played the part of the wronged man, complained about child support, claimed I turned the kids against him. But as the months rolled by, his anger gave way to instability. The girlfriend he'd left me for dumped him. Apparently, she didn't like being a stepmom or footing the bill for a man who couldn't manage his own finances. He lost clients, lost focus. His detailing business, the one he'd once bragged about building from scratch, started bleeding money. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he tried to start a second business, then a third. None of them lasted. He bounced between apartments, took jobs he once called beneath him, and eventually stopped showing up for visits altogether. Lily stopped asking why. Nora didn't know enough to start. Last I heard, he was living in another state, working at a used car lot. No business of his own. No family to come home to. Just stories he probably still tells himself about how life is unfair and women are ungrateful. But me? I'm not ungrateful. I'm grateful for every quiet night, every grocery trip with my girls, every hard-earned dollar I've made. I'm grateful for the peace that comes from knowing exactly who I am and who I'm not. And above all, I'm grateful I didn't let someone else define my worth. He thought he left me broken, but he only made space for me to rebuild, stronger, smarter, and completely free. People always ask how I did it, how I managed 2 young kids on my own, kept my business running, paid the bills, and still showed up with a smile at parent-teacher conferences. Some assume I had help, secret money, a generous relative, a stroke of luck. They want a shortcut in the story, a place to insert, "Oh, that explains it." But there wasn't one. No trust fund, no lottery ticket, no knight in shining armor. Just me, a stubborn will, and the quiet rage that comes when someone tries to erase you from your own life. It's funny. People love to talk about forgiveness like it's a destination, as if once you arrive, you're obligated to unpack your things and stay. But I think forgiveness, for some of us, isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about releasing the idea that we ever needed their apology to begin with. I never got one from Aaron. Not really. He sent one of those awkward, half-hearted texts a year after the divorce. "I know I messed up. Hope you and the girls are doing okay." No punctuation, no specifics, just a line he could tell himself was closure. I didn't respond, not because I was bitter, but because by then I was simply done. The emotional cord had been cut so completely, so cleanly, that replying felt like trying to revive something already buried. And honestly, my life was too full to make room for his regret. Lily grew taller, seemingly overnight. She started helping with Nora, making breakfast for both of them on weekends just to surprise me. She became fierce and funny, with a deep sense of justice that made me proud in a way I can't put into words. Nora, on the other hand, bloomed in her own way, curious and sweet, always wanting to be part of whatever I was doing. Whether it was folding laundry or reviewing invoices, she'd climb onto my lap with a toy calculator and pretend to help. Our days were busy, messy, loud, but the kind of loud that's filled with life, not tension. One afternoon, about 2 years after everything happened, I ran into someone from Aaron's side of the family, his cousin Jenna. We hadn't spoken since the divorce. She was standing in the checkout line at the supermarket, looking a little frayed at the edges. I wasn't sure she'd recognize me, but she did. "Oh, Agatha," she said, her eyes widening. "Wow, you look good." "Thanks," I said, offering a polite smile. She hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "I heard about Aaron. I mean, I'm sure you already know, but he's not doing great." I nodded. "Yeah, I've heard." She blinked, almost surprised at how calmly I said it. "He always talks about the girls," she added quickly, like she needed to say something nice. "Says he misses them." I didn't bite. I didn't fill the silence. Instead, I said something that surprised even me. "I hope he finds peace, eventually." Because I did. Not for him, but for Lily and Nora. Because the more he unraveled, the more I realized how much he'd needed help long before I ever met him. I couldn't save him then, and I wouldn't pretend I could now. Jenna nodded awkwardly. "Anyway, you're doing amazing. I mean, seriously." I thanked her and turned back to the conveyor belt, placing a carton of strawberries between a box of diapers and a stack of manila folders. It was such a simple moment, so ordinary, and yet it held a quiet kind of victory. I didn't need his name anymore. I didn't need his chaos. I had built something lasting, something honest, something real. That night, after the girls went to bed, I sat on the couch with a cup of tea and the living room lights dimmed. The house smelled like lavender and dish soap, and I could hear Nora breathing through the baby monitor. I opened my laptop and finalized a pitch for a new client, one that would grow my business into a full-time agency with a few remote staffers. It felt big, scary, like the edge of a cliff, but also like flight. I thought of the girl I used to be, barely 30, pregnant, betrayed, curled on the couch trying to figure out how her life had come undone. I wanted to reach back through time and touch her hand, tell her that not only would she survive, but she'd thrive, that she'd know joy again, that her daughters would grow up safe, loved, and proud of her, that she wouldn't just rebuild, she'd rise. And she'd do it with her head held high, no longer carrying the weight of someone else's failure. Because sometimes, justice doesn't show up in a courtroom or a headline. Sometimes, it looks like a woman quietly living her best life, while the man who betrayed her slowly fades into the background, no longer needed, no longer missed, just gone. About 6 months after that quiet conversation with Jenna in the supermarket, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a letter. Handwritten, messy, smudged at the edges. It was from Aaron. He'd moved again. This time to another state, smaller town, a mechanic job under a different name than the business he once bragged about building from the ground up. He said he wanted to clear the air, said he was trying to be a better man. The letter was filled with half apologies, vague reflections, and a predictable tone of self-pity. Words like regret, mistakes. Life just got away from me. There was one line that stood out, though. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. I folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope. I didn't tear it up. I didn't burn it. I just put it in a box in the closet, beneath old photos and baby shoes I couldn't part with. Somewhere deep, where it couldn't follow me around. Because by then, I didn't need his words. I didn't need his guilt to validate my worth. I had my girls. I had my business, which had grown beyond anything I imagined. I had a circle of women around me, other single mothers, other survivors, who had become my tribe. We supported each other in big and small ways. Childcare swaps, job referrals, birthday parties, late-night calls when the world felt heavy. We were like a net that caught each other, quietly and without judgment. Lily had started writing poetry, real poetry, with emotion and rhythm and heart. One day she came home from school and said, "Mom, my teacher says I write like someone who's seen things." I smiled and said, "Well, baby, maybe you have." Nora was almost 4 now. She ran everywhere, asked 10 questions a minute, and had no memory of her father. One day, she pointed at an old family photo, one of me and Aaron before she was born, and asked, "Who's that man?" I paused for a moment. Then I said gently, "That's someone Mommy used to know." And that was the truth, because Aaron was no longer a villain in my story. He wasn't even a character anymore. He was just the man who made me realize how much I could survive, how much I could build from nothing, how fiercely I could love when I stopped waiting for someone else to love me first. He lost everything he once claimed to value, his business, his family, his dignity, not because I took it from him, but because he treated it all as disposable. And life has a way of responding to that. Meanwhile, I had gained everything that mattered: freedom, clarity, peace, and above all, 2 daughters who would grow up knowing what strength looks like. Not the loud, angry kind, but the steady, quiet kind that gets up every day and chooses joy, even after pain. Some people think being a single mother is a tragedy, but for me, it was a beginning. Because when he walked out, he left space. And in that space, I built a life he never would have understood. And I wouldn't trade it for anything.